right. Well, good morning, everybody, and good morning to our group that's beaming in via Zoom. So we have about 20 people in total joining us. We have about 10 to 12 folks online as well that are beaming in from all over the place. And so I want to welcome you to this morning's seminar. This morning is sponsored by the Department of Ag Communication Education Leadership, and then also confirmed this morning, actually, the Office of Research for the college. And so we're excited to co-sponsor this event with our college and excited about that opportunity. We are recording for today, and so I've had a number of folks who said that they wanted to be here but could not be here, so I've hit the record button. So whatever you say gets recorded, so just be aware of that. So why broader impacts? I think the big discussion around that is really, why do we do what we do, and why does the public invest in what we do? And that's an important question, and I think it's very important today as probably it ever has been. And so us thinking about how our science and how our research translates to other people, how other people get a sense of the importance of what we do is really important, because it's their tax dollars that are the investment in what it is that we do at universities. And so the NSF has really pushed broader impacts, not just as a checkbox on their grants, but they want really good broader impacts, and that's certainly hitting other funding agencies as well. And so Anna's probably going to talk a little bit about that here in a moment. But why our department in terms of this conversation? I think the thing that we bring to the table is absolutely an opportunity to partner with others in the college in terms of helping bring your science to life in terms of education, communication, and outreach. So please consider us as partners as you think about your future grant endeavors. Anna's actually going to spend time specifically with our department here after a bit, and so we're excited to have her not just do this part, but be with us in the afternoon with ASAP. So to introduce Dr. Anna Ball. Dr. Ball is President and Faculty Fellow Faculty Development, that's a lot of faculty, at the University of Missouri. She's also a professor in the Department of Ag Education and Leadership at the University of Missouri. She started her career, she received her PhD at the University of Missouri, then became an assistant professor at the University of Illinois and the University of Florida before returning back to the University of Missouri, where she's been since 2008, and where she was an associate professor and then professor. She was also chair of the Department of Ag Education and Leadership during my time at the University of Missouri, so I've known Anna for a very long time. She and I are good friends. And so during that time, she was also a faculty fellow in the Office of Research, where she talked about the evaluation component of broader impacts and worked with the broader impacts program that was in the Office of Research at the University of Missouri. And that came about because Anna created a center, the Center for Collaboration and Development of Educational Innovations, that really took us as a faculty and engaged us with others across campus in terms of helping develop educational innovations in grant work. And so because of those connections, I was able to work on several grants, and she has continued to be not just pulled for college grants, but for grants outside the college as well. And so that's been a wonderful opportunity for those of us who engage with CCDEI and University of Missouri. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anna. For those of you who are online, there's a chat box. Make sure that if you have any questions, add them there, and hopefully I will catch them and see them as we move along. I will also be beaming back and forth between the PowerPoint so that you can see it more clearly. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anna. Please help me in welcoming Anna Ball.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tracy, for that wonderful introduction. It's so great to be here at The Ohio State University on this wonderful fall football. You guys have a football team. I notice. You haven't had one at Missouri for a few years, and so it's exciting to be in football land. Your football team is tough. And I figured out why your team is tough, because I drove in here. It's a beautiful drive across the state of Ohio, but it's not for the faint of heart. Once you hit the Columbus metro area, that's how those boys are tough. They make you drive through your traffic every day, don't they? Columbia has only about, 150,000 people-ish, 120.
120, yeah.
120. And I've made the mistake in my 10 years there of complaining about the traffic in Columbia, Missouri. With 120,000, I'll never do that again. It's so great. I'm so happy to be here and just excited to talk a little bit about this notion of how you develop your broader impacts components of your grants, and then tightly connected with that, how you evaluate them. And as we'll talk about a little later on in the presentation, that those effective BI kinds of programs, that notion of what on the development end and the evaluation end should be connected, and they should be certain. You know, Tracy really told my story very well in his introduction. And can the online people hear me?
Yes.
No one's saying.
So far you're okay.
Great. Tracy told my story really well, and I have some ag education counterparts in the room here today. But my story really begins with a couple of roles that I have played in my past career in this notion of ag education, and really specifically focusing on teaching and learning and developing teaching methodologies. But then also, I have also worked for a number of years in faculty development. And so, and helping develop faculty for their teaching and learning. And one of the things that I noticed in my expertise in teaching methodologies, but then working with faculty, is that their needs in terms of development really expands beyond what we think of the traditional formal classroom. And they started talking about wanting to have effective education and outreach components of their grants. And of course, at the same time, the NSF is talking about this notion of broader impacts. And I said, oh, this is a really great opportunity to coalesce some two areas that I'm really passionate about, and how I can work with faculty members to then assist them in designing the components of their grants. Okay? And that's what really we're going to talk about in the next hour and a half so that we have together. But I want this to be interactive, and so I want to start by having you all in the room talk. And again, we have some ag education and leadership folks in the room as well, and hopefully this is a chance for you to interact with them as well, because they're my counterparts at Missouri. So I'd like to go around the room, and I'm sorry I have to ignore the online people for this part, because that would be clunky. But if you would name and title, department, if that's relevant, name, title, department. And then I'm going to have you move around, and we'll do something else here. But and be loud, please, so everybody in the room can hear.
Mary Rodriguez, ASL.
Assistant Professor of?
Assistant Professor of Community Leadership.
Great.
Mary Hartford, ASL. Susanna Wynn.
Wonderful.
Kelly Newland, Director of Education Abroad for the college and doctoral student at ASL.
Aaron Georgie, ASL graduate student.
Amanda Bowling, Visiting Assistant Professor, ASL, specifically within agri-science education.
Melissa Grant, Grant Development Specialist. Susie Whittington, Professor in ASL.
Scott Shear, Professor in ASL, Community Extension and Agri Extension.
Larry Montgomery, Professor.
Robert King at ACL, Associate Professor, Agricultural Communication and International Development.
I'm Robert Phelps in ASL Community Leadership.
I'm Dee Jepson. I'm a little bit in ASL, but I'm tenured over in food ag and biological engineering. I'm Associate Professor for Occupational Safety and Health.
Jeff, I'm in the Office of Research. I work in education funding and research development.
Fantastic. All right.
And I will have the names, hopefully, of the folks who are online. I asked them to type where they are because they're coming from all over the college too. So
Okay.
hopefully they'll come in and I can
Okay.
tell you a little bit of them.
So we have some people outside of
We have people.
connections with the ACEL department.
Yeah, everybody else online probably be outside. So international programs, Department of Entomology, entomology, 4-H youth development. So they're starting to roll in.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So really, okay, this program is for them. Actually, individuals who are coming in here with limited experience in designing and evaluating broader impact. People who are focused less on social sciences research, okay, and this might be a very unique kind of concept for them, but also really concerned with developing quality and cost-effective plans for grants. Okay, so now that I know the departmental divisional coordination of the folks in this room, though, I want to get a sense of what your experiences are with developing and evaluating broader impacts. Mind you, I haven't defined it yet. Okay, but to do that, I want to start with what I like to call a value line. Okay, and so I'm going to line you up across the room, and on this side of the room, well, just up front, we don't have enough to go there across the room. But on this side of the value line, you need people who really haven't heard of broader impacts before, who don't understand what they are at all, and don't think they've engaged. And all the way over to this side of the value line, which would be that you have designed, evaluated, are actively engaged in broader impacts type of work with colleagues. Okay. My only rule is you cannot occupy the same position on the line. Okay. Since you can't stand, on top of each other, that would be rude. So you'll have to, from the 0 to 10 on your value line, you'll have to line up and talk to each other and figure out where you think you are. Okay? Does that make sense? No experience, actively engaged. Okay? Oh, well, right here's in between.
We're just horrible to suck at it.
Okay, so you could be a 5, you could be a 6, you could be a 4.
He can probably hear you.
We've been here. Thank you. Is she going to be around the rest of the day?
So you have folks from animal sciences, the grants office, public health.
Okay.
So you've got a variety of folks that are online.
All right. So what's my high position on the line? Are you guys 10s? Over here? I would say 9. 9?
That's good. That's fine. It's all.
7.
5-ish, 4-ish, maybe.
Okay.
5-ish, maybe.
Okay.
Until you define more clearly.
Okay.
5-ish.
Okay, so my last slide.
This is one to below.
Okay. So, and remember, you guys are communicating with our group online as well. Tracy, could you reiterate the disciplines that we have represented in our online group?
Absolutely. Department of Entomology, International Programs in Agriculture, 4-H Youth Development, Animal Sciences, School of Environment and Natural Resources, the Probe Office at OARDC, Public Health, and one of our grants officers. Yeah.
All right, so folks who put themselves in this Well, let's talk about why you put yourself in that. You grad students, you are all grad students. Quite a few grad students in this group. Okay, so. You're a grad student at heart, right? Always a grad student at heart. Okay. Right, logic. Right. And really become familiarized with the terms, becoming familiar with the grading, with evaluation. So my in between, Bob, I think you taught the class on evaluation that I took in grad school. By the way, I fear him the most.
Because he's on his way out.
So like middle of the range people, why did you rate yourselves in that category?
I work in grants and I work with impact statements. And
Okay.
Just not.
Okay.
And I know exactly what they're talking about impact cloud.
Okay. Different levels of familiarity.
Yeah, I mean, I was part of mental health grant, so it's not, so again, statewide impact, kind of stuff. Social extension to different stuff. So I think it just depends on, how you're able to talk about it.
And in my area, it's very tough to show impact. How many lives did we save? How many fingers, and we can talk about dollars and economic value of quality of life, but so that's why I was joking that I was like, okay, I write them all the time, but I always need to hone in on that and figure out how to do that, because in my field, it's very difficult to say definitively what we've done.
Right. Absolutely. So my folks who are at the top end of this scale. Your current evaluators on grants.
Yes.
You just finished the focus groups last night.
Yes.
Okay.
So just experience with writing impact statements and experience with understanding broader impacts. I think the hardest thing for me is always measuring that broader impact or being able to like we said, how do you say how many people I've saved through this intervention, right, and things. So that's always the difficulty, which is why I don't feel very top, but I'm it's fun.
And unfortunately, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, so the Office of Research offers a series of workshops for the NSF Early Career Award.
Okay.
A major component of that is an outreach and engagement plan, diversity action plan kind of thing. And we have worked with faculty over the years, and Ohio State enjoys one of the highest success rates in terms of the number of awards in that space, mostly because we have such incredible faculty. But I do think it's because we also teach them how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of success stories and almost a formula about how to go after those kinds of grants that we think works. Yep.
All right. And so I would venture to say, my folks in online land, given some of the disciplines, they would be entering this world of BI more in where I have listed the assumptions. And so for those of you who are in partners like ASOL, in evaluation, extension evaluation kinds of worlds, research support kinds of worlds, you're the kind of future collaborators with these folks. You're the ones that in the future who become the ones delivering these kinds of presentations. So this will be interesting. I wish some of them were here, to interact with us live, because it would have been really nice for them to be able to hear the kinds of science that they're working on, and the kinds of research that they have about broader impact, and how you might connect your own expertise to that. But that's okay. I'm just going to give a plug for them to reach out to you. All right, let's get started.
Make sure to speak. They're getting some volume in and out. And I think
they are?
I
I think it was because I was standing too far away, maybe because I was back.
And it was partially with the participants. But
Oh,
sure,
okay, okay. So what we're going to do today is talk about what broader impacts, this notion of NSF broader impact, and what that means. And that extends, that's an NSF-specific term, but you need outreach and engagement, education components for NIFA grants, for USAID grants, for all of the grants that we write. Broader impacts just happens to be the NSF term that we use. And I think it's a really great global term to describe this notion of what we're doing. The notion that Tracy talked about, that our science matters, that the science matters in society, and government entities that are funding research want to fund research that illustrates that it's making a difference, besides to just the 10 people who read the research manuscript after the fact. We'll talk about types and process of evaluation and ways that you can think about collecting data. And then, particularly for our scientists who are reaching out to these resource individuals, think about some key resources for our scientists, and again, do a plug for the folks in the room who do this kind of work on a regular basis, and the kind of expertise that they can lend to our scientists working groups. Now, the caveat and the problem with having folks like you in the room is that this tutorial and evaluation, like I mentioned, Bob Birkenholtz taught the class on evaluation that I took in grad school. And so these kinds of terms, I think, are going to be familiar to many of you. They may be new to some of you. I may give you some structural, thoughts on how you might want to organize things based upon what you hear. I don't know that I'll be giving any of you in the room much new information on evaluation kinds of things. A couple of you talked about really how you measure impacts in important ways. How do we measure world peace, right? That's what we want to show, that our grants are achieving. It's the beauty queen, world peace, right? Level of achievement. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to solve that for you today, and that's our biggest challenge, right? We'll kind of talk about why that's a challenge, but how we might measure things that we can measure in the span of a 3-year or a 4-year or a 5-year award. Right? All right, so defining broader impacts. It's been required by NSF since prior to 2016, but the latest grant proposal guidelines of NSF in 2016 talk about how proposals are part of 2 merit criteria to review. Now, the intellectual merit, okay, so that's the merit, that's the potential to advance the knowledge, that's the scientific merit of the award, but then that's number 2, the broader impacts merit, okay? So the potential to benefit society and contribute to the achievement of specific desired societal outcomes. So essentially, NSF is saying we're going to fund our science, good science, but good science that has an impact on society, okay? Or that at least attempts to have an impact, wants to have an impact in society by design, based upon this broader impact component. So this can happen in a couple of ways. It can happen, the broader impacts portion of a grant can happen via the research itself, okay? It can happen through activities that are related to the research of the project, or maybe not activities that are directly related to the research, but activities that are supported by the research. Okay. So let me give you an example of that. And you can kind of maybe think about the grants that you might, ASIL people in the room, the grants that you've worked on in the past, where those activities might fall. Is it the research itself? Is it directly related to the research? Or is it complementary or supported by? Okay. So one of the current NSF projects that I'm a co-investigator on is through the Department of Animal Sciences, and their research has to do with remapping EPDs, basically remapping beef genomics. Okay? And I designed so the educational goal is to help future beef producers become educated on how they think about beef genetics. Okay? And so I've designed educational components to do that, and I'm evaluating the success of those. Okay? So is that the research itself? Are those activities that are directly related to the research project? Or are they just sort of on this complementary subsidiary entity. What do you think? What category would you classify that as, or that example as? Okay, so, right. So the research is essentially remapping how they think about genetics. And with that, the scientist, the broader impact is to educate future producers on how to rethink genetics and how they interpret genetics, how they use genetics. Okay? So my question is my broader impact, the research itself, is it directly related, or is it just supported and complementary to? What would you think?
I have some uncertainty about the actual project, like if they're changing the numbers related to EPDs and going back and collecting new genetics and actual outcomes versus expected progeny differences and such. But my assumption is that it's complementary if indeed they're trying to recalculate EPDs and come up with a new scientific reason for doing that.
Yes.
Educating the public would be complementary.
Yes. So I'm educating the public, I'm educating producers. Complementary activity to the research that's essentially developing. So who in the room has similar examples that they have worked on that would be considered broader impact type work? I know you do. I know some of you have worked on this stuff. Who wants to share?
And I'm the evaluator on one right now that we're just beginning. So truly just at the reading proposal stage and calling together the advisory committee yesterday. And so I'm thinking about your questions here, and I'm not exactly quite sure I can answer because it's writing curriculum for communicators to work with industry to have their current and future industry employees better, more effective communicators.
Okay.
Listening skills, from listening skills through to social media types of skills to writing articles types of skills. So it's 7 modules, and so the audience are the future industry personnel and leaders. We're doing the curriculum part, and I'm evaluating all of it.
Fantastic.
So even yesterday, I was doing the notes on the meeting with the advisory council.
Fantastic. Yes.
And Anna, will you repeat a little bit of that so that it gets picked up in the microphone for those who are online?
Yes. So Susie is essentially, and you're involved from the design phase of this project all the way through the evaluation. Okay. Okay. So it was to educate future industry professionals on communication skills. Yes. And so she's a designer of that curriculum, that these curricular modules that are intended to develop those skills.
So the advisory meeting yesterday was input from them on our first draft of the modules. And I am evaluating that entire project.
Okay. So I would say that your activities are pretty tightly linked to the project itself. Absolutely, they're pretty tightly linked to the project itself. Yes.
So Ohio State has a partnership with COSI, which is our Museum of Science and Industry. We also have a program called Labs and Light, where the laboratory is actually based in COSI and the public interact with researchers. So that's like a great example of the research itself is fulfilling the broader impact. And sometimes they actually participate in experiments and gather data and all these parts.
COSI.
It's a OSU leases space from COSI and our researchers.
So it's a research incubator space, essentially, that OSU has. Is this a college level or campus level space?
But it's more individuals, so it's like research programs. Individual faculty members can apply to host their lab there, and they sort of get a lease agreement for X number of months.
Where would individual faculty members find out how to apply. For my folks online,
Yeah, they
it's-
can contact the office of research.
Okay.
It's more long, but yeah, they can.
Fantastic. Okay. Are you typing that in for them? Okay.
Yep.
Because I'm sure they're vigorously,
Mhm.
not texting, but you know, I am. That's what we use all the time. I'm behind on my chatting. All right. So the kinds of societal impacts that NSF communicates on their website, in their full participation of women, persons with disabilities, and underrepresented minorities in STEM kinds of fields, specific emphases on African Americans, Native Americans, Alaska Natives, Pacific Islanders, so are really underrepresented groups. Okay, specific emphasis there. Improve STEM education and educator development. Many of you in ASOL, many of you who are education people, you absolutely are in the business of that and should be the experts designing the BI components. Okay. Educator development at any level. Increase public scientific literacy and public engagement with science and technology. So my ag communications folks, public science, you are absolutely in the business of that. Public engagement with science and technology. The extension people in the room, you're absolutely in the business of that and should be the experts who are designing these components of the grant. Development of a diverse, globally competitive STEM workforce.
You can collaborate with me on that.
Yes.
Broad money.
Study abroad people. Increase partnerships between academia, industry, and others. And you know, it sounds like, Susie, the grant that you're working on kind of, it's really doing that. Absolutely doing that. Yeah. Improve national security, increase economic competitiveness of the United States, enhance infrastructure for research and education. Okay. So, you know, again, this, for my people in the live audience, it should be an interesting, if you hadn't thought about it in this way before, particularly my ASOL, my extension people here in the live audience, this is either what you do, what you have been doing for a number of years, or grad students, what you're being trained to do. Okay? We don't always think of it and talk about it in that way, and think about how we can be experts on these kinds of endeavors and how we can truly make a difference. But I will tell you just how great that is, and in some ways what a relief that is to your more what I will call bench scientists, that they don't have to be the experts on the broader impact. They don't have the time, nor do they have the expertise, nor do they want to develop that, okay? It's hard enough working on their own science that they're passionate about. Guess what? This is our science. On this sheet, or on this PowerPoint slide, this is our science, okay? And so think about how you can connect that and illustrate that to them. So, transitioning, shifting to then why we should evaluate and how we can use and how we can and should be designers and evaluators in that. And those, how many of you have taken evaluation courses and or taught evaluation courses? Over half the people in the room. So this is going to be most valuable to my folks who can't see me, okay? So I would say, can they weigh in? How many of them have never taken how many of them have, which way should we ask it? Taken or never taken? Which way are you gonna ask it, Tracy?
I'll ask how many you have taken an evaluation
I'm gonna
course.
venture to say most of the folks in my online audience have not taken an evaluation course, or this is the first time they're hearing about it in the context of how we evaluate broader impacts or education or outreach, depending on which funder that you're talking about, how we evaluate those components of grants. Two, okay. So most of the individuals, right? This tutorial really is for them. This is going to be a lot of review from your evaluation classes, evaluators. You know, the bottom of the slide is the key to the successful BI component, okay? Because good evaluation, my evaluators in the room, as you know, starts with design. It starts with needs assessments. It starts with Susie talking to the advisory committee and finding out what they need in the first place before you ever design the module, okay? So it's a key to the successful component of these grants. Okay? But really it's that overall program cycle, okay, in the first place. Now, one of the things that I have found though, and folks out specifically online, in order for us to do that, the collective us in the room who are going to be your would-be evaluators, you have to bring us in on the project at the beginning. You have to bring us in at the beginning. Okay? So many times we're asked to be a part of these projects or to design an evaluation component about 2 weeks before the grant deadline. And I can do that. And these folks can do that. We're good at that. We have boilerplates for designing your evaluation, but it's not going to be nearly as good as it would be if you would bring us in on the project inception. Because we could tell you, no, you probably don't want to do college level lectures to a group of beef producers about genetics. That might not be a successful BI. Okay, now it may get funded because your reviewers may buy that. They may think that's okay, but really to achieve the intention of your education component, it's probably not going to be as successful. But if you bring us in the beginning, we can help you design something that's successful. So good broader impacts and the evaluation thereof for you should not be adversarial. Okay, this is a cooperative kind of endeavor. We're helping you make this project better. Should not be an afterthought. I just got on my soapbox about that, please. And it shouldn't be a budget buster. Okay, and we'll talk about where you might think about where we live in your grant budgets. Okay, we'll talk about that. Different types of evaluation that you can think about. More formative, that are sort of at the program inception or looking more at the process stages of your program, all the way through summative, where you're actually trying to analyze and report your outcomes, your cost benefit, as Dee talked about, your impacts, that kind of evaluation. And I'll illustrate with a little graphic later on that you'll want to, in your evaluation, you'll want to account for the more formative and the more summative types of evaluation in your entire project. But as we get more summative and we get more impact evaluation related, it gets timelier, it gets more expensive. And you want to think about that, scientists, and you want to budget for that. So this is just a graphic illustrating, what are more formative, what are more inception or process-oriented evaluations would be. So in needs assessment, the question being asked is what are the needs? What are the needs in the first place? What are the gaps with this audience in the first place? The more program, is this program being implemented in a way that makes sense, in a way that's effective, all the way over to what are the larger impacts that we want to predict with this program. So the steps to conducting a really good evaluation and designing, again, this should be a framework for that design of your broader impacts. You need to start with a lot from that, decide what the project's going to be in the first place, then determine your design, which determines how you collect and analyze data. And don't forget the last piece of this, which is disseminating that information to your stakeholders. And oftentimes, that's where we fall short. Those of you who have had some evaluation experience in the room and want to admit that dissemination piece, have you felt yourself falling short there? Right? Because what happens at the end of 3 or 4 years? Bob? Right. And the money's gone. The money's gone, and the time is gone because you filled it with something else. And you're ready to send off a report, send off the report to NIFA or NSF or, and just be done with it, okay? And that notion of dissemination, to the extent that you can, again, budget for that, is really important. It's really important to, I'll just tell you a little bit of a story about the University of Missouri, okay? Some of you may have read about us in the Chronicle a time or two, a couple of years ago, and some challenges that we have had as an institution. And there are, larger challenges that I won't get into, but a part of those challenges had to do with the fact that we became, from a leadership standpoint and from a university standpoint, farther and farther disengaged from our stakeholders. Okay? And as an AAU institution, we're always striving for, and you all are in AA as well, this whole notion of big preeminence, right? Okay, but we had lost sight of local relevance, local stakeholder engagement. Okay, I'm arguing that disseminating the information about the kinds of impact that you're making to the folks that you're making it on is just as important as disseminating it in the journal. Okay? Because you connect back to the reason why you exist in the first place. And if you look at the NSF mission statement, the reason why they've added broader impacts, the reason why they exist, the reason why they're funding research. Okay? So don't forget that dissemination piece, and don't forget to budget for that dissemination piece, and how you account for those kinds of things. That's a little bit. So going back to then the 3 steps: logic, model, design, and dissemination. How many of you have done logic models in the room? How many logic model people?
Most of our students say it's always a logic model.
Always.
They know the logic.
They know. So you've heard of
We're gonna do it for class.
everyone. So it's okay. How many people?
Program planning class is logic model.
I mean, they
Okay.
know Latin model.
So I have everybody. So this logic model tutorial is a review for all of you. How
And
many people online?
we have some folks, Carol saying she's done a logic model, Bo. So there's some folks on
Okay.
here that have done
But I'm
logic
assuming there are quite a few folks who have not heard about what a logic. So when I present this to scientists, bench scientists, most of them have not heard what they don't know what a logic. Do your Office of Research folks?
The folks that never heard of it are team.
Really?
Yeah, and we introduced it to them, and they were absolutely intrigued. Never really thought about their research in this way.
Interesting. And my folks who are in the College of Ag and who have interfaced with ag education or extension people, they'll typically know what one is. But across the university, I find that you get much outside the College of Ag, and this is just genius to them. So it's who are presenting this to outside audiences. Make sure you introduce that. Okay? And again, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, given this audience, but you have your inputs, your outputs, and your outcomes. Okay? At its most basic level. And I still use the resources from the University of Wisconsin website on logic models. They have boilerplates, they have entire templates. You can just plug this thing in. They have, I want to say, about 5 different templates on the web for different kinds of logic models that you can use. They're awesome. So those of you who haven't used that site, definitely grab that off of the website. It's really great in terms of helping you organize. So for my folks out here who are not familiar with logic models, inputs are essentially the resources that you're putting into the grant. Okay? The time, the money, the people that you're putting into the program, the broader impacts program. The outputs are really split into activities and participation. So it's what you do, what your broader impacts does, and who. Okay, what you do and for whom. And then your outcomes, that's essentially the impact that you're measuring. Okay, you can think about those in short-term, medium, long-term kinds of impacts. Did I miss anything? People who teach this? Sorry, Bob, I'm gonna pick on you the whole entire time. Only because I'm just, it's, And you always fear the person most in the room that is the expert on the thing, right?
I'm still learning.
You're still learning. That's good. What else would you add to this? Folks who do this a lot. Did I miss anything for my others online?
Well, just your comment about what's involved, I think is very helpful. You know, see the whole part, like inputs. What is it? What we invest?
Yes.
Output, what we do, I think that's very helpful. If you're not too familiar with the logic model, I think that is a good way to quickly understand it.
Yeah.
You know what inputs, outputs, outcomes are. I don't even hear like Ocean Extension when they went to use the logic model as a way to evaluate grants and programs and whatnot. And they really had to do with a lot of times we stop at outputs.
Yes.
We reach 1,000 people, but then with the outcomes are made you
Right.
to look at that.
Right. Rather than just counting the numbers of the people in the seats, you actually measure.
But the outcomes too are like the learning action and conditions. I think that is a good way to understand whether it's short, medium, or long term. One is just learning, it's what you're
Yeah.
here. And the action that's tough, you have to do with those conditions. I think those headings are very helpful. Learning, action, conditions.
Absolutely. So just to summarize, because they can't hear this microphone back there. Just to summarize. So really, if you'll boil down your logic model to three essential things: your inputs, your outputs, and your outcomes. Okay, so your inputs are what you invest, your outputs are what you do, and then your outcomes are what you're measuring. And they further delineate outcomes to short, medium, and long term. So your short term tend to be, what do people learn in this workshop? Okay, immediately, what did they learn in that one workshop today? Your medium term tends to be, so they learned something, but then later on, did they change their behavior in any way? Did they behave differently as a result? And then your long term, again, I'll go back to, it's the world peace outcomes, right? Are we changing society in some way? It's the most difficult to measure, and nearly, realistically, really impossible to measure in the span of a 3-year award. Okay, you're going to have continuations of the award to truly be able to grasp and begin to measure some of those long term. So this was just a little bit of my folks who are writing the broader impacts objectives, particularly if you are not involving your social sciences and your ag educators and your education evaluation people on the inception. So if you're writing the broader impacts objectives yourself, my advice to you is to please be you want to mirror them to your overall project goals. Okay, you want to mirror them to the science. So if the science aims to do X, you shouldn't have a broader impact goal that does something entirely different, because it's going to be very difficult. We're not going to be able to evaluate that, and it's not going to be successful. It's not going to be connected in any way. So it should mirror your science portion, your merit portion of your grade. You need to think about what's feasible and what you can feasibly measure. I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. Okay. So those of you who do this, you're used to writing these kinds of tools. But for my folks who are bringing, if you're bringing them in late to the game, think about what you have written that they will do, that your broader impacts people are doing. And think very carefully through what you want them to do. Have any of you been on, those of you who are my BI and evaluator people, how many of you have come into grants late in the game as the evaluator, and perhaps had they brought you in earlier, you may have written those goals differently, or you may have designed that program differently in a way that might have been more effective for them. Anyone have any stories that they want to share with that?
I think we're doing that right now currently with a project that we're evaluating. They created the program and then said, oh, okay, now can you
see through our evaluations is that they're very basic, just knowledge change, and there's no broader impact evaluation truly happening with this project. We are trying to even measure some of the medium-term outcomes, but I mean, that's an instruction as well. And so, if they had, when you said Robinson at the beginning, then we said, okay, well, let's talk about the overall project goals and see how can we look to see these bigger impacts more so than just.
Sure. Do you have an example? Or is it the same? Yeah. Oh, okay. It was the same example. Yeah. So, one of the things I find, and again, I go back to measuring long-term impacts is very different, or very difficult. But one of the things that I find, I'll give you an example of an NSF grant that was around physics education and for physics teachers and integrating and enhancing underrepresented groups in physics education. The educational, I was brought in late to the game, and to do the evaluation component, but the big challenge with that being on that project was that the scientist who is very phenomenal at physics and phenomenal at his science essentially had a physics educator program that was a series of lectures for high school teachers at times that they're not able to attend in a format that my folks who are teacher educators in the room, it was just not a useful format. I mean, they were learning these great concepts that he had created in a format that they weren't going to ever incorporate into their own classrooms because they needed the educator in the room to say, this is how you should do this workshop with your teachers. This is how you need to incorporate this content with your teachers. So that in some ways that makes my evaluation, that makes your evaluation null and void, because if it's not designed correctly in the first place, what you evaluate, it's going to say that it's ineffective. Well, that's because it's not because the science was bad. Okay, it's because how they needed to tweak that education component. And I bet some of you, have had some similar kinds of thoughts in your experiences before. Okay. So then in the design, once you write your objectives, you essentially develop your design, develop your methodological approach. Okay. And you can use a number of approaches from Alfie to doing specific quasi-experimental designs, testing and intervention, to qualitative. I am a qualitative methodologist, and I happen to use a lot of focus groups, a lot of individual interviews, a lot of qualitative methodologies. And that's something when I'm working with hard scientists, that's something very new to them. So, and you'll have to talk about that. That's something that they've often not encountered and not really heard of. And they'll question your scientific rigor and your scientific process around that. And it's important for you to educate that there is a rigor, there is a process that you are collecting this data, and this is how you analyze it, and this is how you report themes, and this is how you verify. And then at the end, I have found, and some of you who worked in these realms as well can share, I have found that my scientists actually are much more enlightened from an evaluation standpoint on the qualitative portions of the evaluation than the surveys. Now, of course, they have to have the survey data, and we've got to report those things out, okay, to our funders. But don't be afraid to do qualitative work in this, because it really can give you some rich information. And it helps you then on the future design of the project as well, particularly if you have continuation, they're applying for continuation. So a word, and this is a very old reference, and I hope you can they see that on the screen? Is it?
It's okay.
Okay. I wanted to show you really a hierarchical model for the kinds of things that you could measure when you're evaluating the broader impact. So at that basic level, you're measuring your inputs, okay? So you're measuring how many people taught X, how much money you spent on this workshop, okay? What you invested into the program. And you can report that out. My safety people, you probably report that out, right? That's your baseline level, okay? And then on up the hierarchy, 2 and 3, how many workshops did you deliver? How many people attended each workshop? How long of a duration were the workshops? Again, you're gonna report that out. You're gonna report that out. Number 4 level, what were the reactions of the participants? Did they like the workshop? Did they say that they learned something? What did they perceive about the workshop? Please don't ask them if the room was hot or cold, or if they liked the food. Okay, well, you can ask them that, but that's not helpful for you, for your evaluation, okay, for your broader impact evaluation for your reporting. Okay. What are the perceptions of what are their perceptions? Okay. What do they feel about the effectiveness of the program? Now, scientists, you actually can probably, if you have the time or have a grad student who's organized enough, you probably can do 1, 2, 3, or 4 yourself. Okay? You can bean count, you can record, you know the investments you put in, you know the number of workshops someone has delivered, you know the number of people who have attended, okay? You probably don't need an external evaluator, at least to do number 1, number 2, number 3, okay? Now 4 and above, you probably need help now because you're designing evaluations. You're designing surveys to measure a change in knowledge, skills, attitudes, or aspirations. And then finally, at that top level, you're designing that sort of the ultimate program impact or societal, economic, environmental change as a result of the program. Do I have any questions? Does that seem clear to the group?
I think it's nice how that model mirrors a lot.
Yes. Absolutely. Right, that mirrors the logic model. So then, this is just a visual to, and again, it mirrors the step model, okay? It mirrors the step model. But this visual shows you the X's, 1X represents the low cost, low effort. Really, the evidence is easy to collect. All the way up to, if you're trying to measure that societal, economic, world peace kind of change, it's going to take a lot more time. It's going to be costlier, and the kinds of evidence that you have to illustrate to demonstrate that you truly changed something in society as a result of this, or the higher kind of thing. Yes, Mary.
So how much do you see that people are claiming changes in this long-term impact, but that are actually improving their?
I mean, everyone claims, you know, you want to write grants in a way that, you know, the result of our work is that we would have societal change, right? And we are going to claim that. And because if we're all passionate about this work, we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't think that. So I don't think that is actually a disingenuous thing. Okay? So you're going to see that claim. The thing that I'm arguing is that it's nearly impossible to truly measure whether that change happened in the span of a 4-year grant. Okay. Yes.
I was thinking like a meta-analysis of journal articles that was evaluation, and looked at it in terms of criteria of how it would fit, but that it looked at, and Mary's question, but it looked at the knowledge, behavior in the long term. And again, most were knowledge, some behavior. If I remember correctly, it was maybe 5% or less.
Yes.
Now, so this is going back 5-year cohorts, 60s to present. It was publishing.
Yes.
Article that I'm talking about. But yeah, very few. You know, actually, you know, could document that they did the long term, because again,
yes,
I'm right there. I'm
right.
There with the knowledge and behavior.
Yeah, knowledge and behavior.
My stuff.
And that's okay. That's actually okay. I mean, I think that for us as evaluators, for us working with collaborators in this realm, I think that we need to just recognize that and be realistic about that and do the best job we can measuring the knowledge and behavioral changes that we want to illustrate, as opposed to trying to design elaborate evaluations that will never truly measure societal change. I say we really try to do a good job on the knowledge and then trying to get at that behavioral or practice change, okay? We talked about some data collection methods, surveys, interviews, observations, tests, case studies. I already talked about the qualitative, quantitative. Don't forget qualitative methods in your evaluation data collection. And finally, I wanted to just show you, this is an example of a BI logic model that this is kind of my boilerplate that I use and that I will often, particularly this person, I think they did not involve me as early as I would like. Okay, so I think I had maybe a week before, or a couple of weeks before I submitted that one, before that needed to be submitted to the funder. But this is what I'll use, okay? So on the objective and the outputs columns of this example, those were already developed for me because they were already in the RFP that the lead PI had written, okay? So what I do is I just download right out of their narrative and I put them in that column. Sometimes I have to sort out what I think their objectives are for me. And sometimes I have to clarify. And if I have editing power, I will rewrite those. So a word to the wise, a strategy is to meet with one of your collaborators, particularly, I mean, you folks are in the business of writing outcomes objectives. Okay, so you know how to do that. Not everyone is. All right, so if they're not in that business, you may have to kind of tweak those objectives for them, or at least clarify. But, so if I'm brought in late, if you're brought in late to the grant, typically your objectives and your outputs are already determined. So then what I do is, based upon those two things, I try to figure out, okay, how am I going to collect the data and what's my timeline? And that timeline will mirror the activities of the grant. So if they tell me they're doing these certain things in year one, I know in year one, those are my activities, or these certain things in year two. So again, the grant really kind of guides that third column. And then I have to decide what are my data sources and what is my budget relative to that. They have that for each of those collaborative projects. And that's a really nice kind of a model to plunk in. Sometimes we don't have room. So sometimes you have to ask for room from your PI person. Hey, I need a page. But you're going to be happy that I added this page because it's going to make it really clear what we're doing. So a couple of reflections. Reflections from your friendly BI collaborator. And this is what I like to tell my scientists, and this is what I want you, my ASO people, to tell your scientists. Please select your friendly BI collaborator at the inception of your project. I've talked about this ad nauseum throughout this session. And agree to the scope of their work and think about the kinds of things that they'll be doing. And agree to the way that they will be involved in your project. So are they going to be a co-investigator with you? Is this truly sort of a collaborative, or are they that I'm tapping you on solely to just do this instrument or just do these focus groups? And that's okay too. And as long as everyone's clear about the scope of that. You really need a budget for approximately 10 to 12% of total direct costs for the evaluation component. Okay? 10 to 12%, and that's cheap. It's very cheap at 10 to 12%. I want to say USAID requires 20%, if I remember correctly, on a lot of their RFPs. They require the lead investigator to map out 20%. Okay. I don't know, does NSF have a requirement on on evaluation budget yet. They don't.
Often the required lease most often is an external program evaluator.
Okay. And also think about so the way that that evaluation money will come out of that budget. Okay? So is that graduate assistance or summer salary for your faculty people who are your evaluators? So for me, I would tell my scientists that when they're buying me, they're actually buying grad assistants. Because there was one of me, and I had about 5, Amanda's shaking her head because she's been my grad assistant on several of my projects. You know, I had about 5 different jobs that I was doing at one time, and so when they bought my work, essentially they were buying Amanda's grad assistant on the grants. And I would meet with her and obviously guide through that project, but I wasn't actually doing. And I made that clear in the beginning. And that's also, in some ways, that I found that it's, at least for my folks at MU, that's a little bit more palatable than, I'm gonna have to give you $50,000 a year. Well, you're supporting graduate education at MU. Thank you. Yeah. Now, but this can happen through direct consulting fees. So the smaller evaluations, and by consulting fees, I don't get that out of pocket. It goes into my center. Our center will charge a consulting fee. But for a smaller kind of I'm just collecting data 1 or 2 times a year kind of a thing, $5,000 to $10,000 a year. Okay, and that's just a direct fee that goes in. We just do that. Okay, and make that happen, and then buy help later, buy grad assistance later. And then also think about what you're budgeting in terms of what it's going to cost to collect the data, any type of resources to analyze, any type of resources to report it out, those kinds of things. Other reflections from your friendly BI collaborator that I missed. Those of you who have worked in this world and might want to offer suggestions to our scientists working with broader impacts people. Other words to the wise? That you wish you would have told them in the beginning of the
presentation. One of the things that you might have a discussion earlier is on this question like publications and where, if you're doing just the evaluation, you get to be listed as a co-author on all publications, only part of the publication, it depends on how the size of the project. Having that discussion earlier is a lot easier than like, why didn't you include me?
Yes.
You wrote that.
That's a really great point. That's a really great, I need to add that to this slide actually. So agreeing to, I don't know if they heard, so I'll reiterate, agreeing to early on in the project publications and where you'll publish some of that data, co-authorship. You know, interestingly enough, many of my NSF people are like, you publish this evaluation data wherever you want to. It doesn't count for them in their disciplines, at least the individuals that I work for. Now, of course, they're going to be my co-author, and that's appropriate. But in terms of really having some sort of a territorial hold on that data, you know, the sky's the limit for me in terms of being able to publish that in the appropriate outlet. So, for my scientists, types of evaluators and key resources for you to think about. Consider external consultants outside of the university. Okay, you can do that. You're going to pay a lot more for an external consultant outside of the university. I would bank on the fact, my folks at MU, I tell them to really look at your resources within the university first, because there are a lot of great people who do this kind of work that you can collaborate with. Many of your universities have evaluation or assessment centers. So OSU does, yes, ish, have evaluation assessment centers.
Extension does.
Extension has an assessment evaluation program evaluation center through Extension. Okay.
We have there's a research methodology center in the College of Education.
Okay.
And they have lots of resources.
Okay. So at MU we have something called the assessment resource center in the College of Education. Now, what the ARC does, they're now entirely a for-fee center. They're entirely sort of an externally auxiliary center, if you will. And so they design our end-of-course evaluations for the university. They will also do a high-level sort of evaluation design for projects. I would say if your funder, it absolutely wants you to have an big external evaluator rather than going to a consultant outside of the university, I would go to that level of center. Otherwise, you really can think about bullets 3 and 4 on the side, which are those social sciences researchers and research centers within your own college or within your own university. So the ASIL people need to be the folks that you reach out to first, okay? And again, we have folks who are communication specialists, community leadership specialists, formal education specialists, non-formal education specialists in ASIL, okay? So depending upon any kind of design that you have for your grant, they're gonna be one or multiple of them are going to have that expertise, okay? Back to that, what NSF wants, slide number 2 that I had in the beginning. Many of the people in this room are going to be able to do that. So you can also do your own evaluation. I call this DIY evaluation. If you don't have a lot of money, maybe you've got a grad student that you can put on this. I'm going to tell you, it's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to take a lot of headache. Amanda's shaking her head as the grad student who does this work, and has had to be on this as a person who's an expert in this. It takes a lot of time. So I just, yes, you can do DIY evaluation. I caution my scientists against that. And really think about, again, taking advantage of the resources of your social sciences. These are just some resources and links that I provided here in my slides today. As we kind of conclude today, what questions? What questions? Do I have any questions from our internet land, or questions here from the audience?
Can you talk about your center a little bit?
Yes.
How long is it going on?
Are you coming to the department?
Yes.
Okay.
So we do.
Yeah. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on the center when we do the departmental. And I actually don't want to broadcast the center here because I don't want people to contact me from OSU. I want them to contact you. Please don't contact me. I'm in the provost's office now, and I don't have time. I'll tell you no. Okay. But contact them.
How do you, so you just made a really good point of looking inward, Ohio State's faculty to see who can support in evaluations like this. How have you gone about finding these collaborators or kind of self-advertising your skill set in evaluation? That's something that I've been doing for several years, several grants now, but none here at Ohio State.
So I'll talk about that a little bit more. And so your departmental presentation is more at that strategy level, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But short answer, it's largely been grassroots. But we'll talk, we'll unpack some strategies for you guys when we do our lunch session. So bring that back again.
How much attention should you give to stakeholders? It seems like many people just use stakeholders as a lip service, but they really don't attend to them or have their active participation.
Sure, and I think that's the intent of the NSF broader impacts language, is that stakeholders matter, is that the people who are the recipients of the science matter. So what NSF is saying is you give them equal attention. That your science is important, but your broader impacts, the people you're impacting, are equally important.
But time is of essence.
Yes. And that does, and that's a challenge, because it's expensive to conduct the science, and people will just run out of money in the budget. And so really that education and evaluation component tends to be, I mean, you're really crunching down, and labs are expensive, and it's hard to do those things, and pay that adequate attention to that. But it's essential.
Carol's asking online, does ACEL routinely collaborate on outreach portions of grants written by CFES faculty if approached? And I think the answer to that is yes. We do, Carol. I would say most of the faculty, Susie just gave an example of a meeting she had yesterday. Mary Rodriguez and I were doing focus groups last night, as a matter of fact, with one of our groups. Annie and Emily have collaborated with AEDE on the food waste project. So we've got a lot of people, a lot of examples of folks who, yes, absolutely routinely do that. Thanks for the question, Carol.
I just have a question. In one of my future evaluation projects, I would like to add one component called cost of the program. So do you have experience share something about on the beginning stage about it?
So you're being asked to evaluate the cost?
No, it's going to be one of the component of the program by itself that I would like to.
So you're essentially reporting the costs?
Will you repeat that?
So she asked, you have an evaluation component of a grant, and so you're reporting the cost of the program as a part of the grant. Absolutely. So that I don't specifically have experience tracking program costs myself. That would be up to my lead investigators to actually track what they spend on that. So that they tend to be, they're directing the budgets. But if you look at inputs and resources, that's that number one level of the evaluation. So you would want to transfer it into the dollar amounts and report that. It's absolutely appropriate. Yep.
Well, and economics might also show up in level 5 too, depending on what it is you're doing, right?
Absolutely. So you could report out things like, this program costs $10,000, but we actually had an outreach of 100,000 people. So in that way, you're giving some sort of a notion about the cost effectiveness program. Good question. We good? Other questions? Well, that really wraps up the evaluation and broader impacts 101. And again, I think this is the charge. Those of you who are evaluators, really think about, I want to go back to that slide. Really think about the skill set that you bring to your scientists in terms of what you can do for them and how you might talk about that. And scientists out on the internet, contact your friendly ASOL people because they can bring these things to you. It's been great visiting with you today. Thank you.
Let's give Anna a round of applause.
Anna, we appreciate your bringing some thoughts to us from those of us who are multiple sides of the grant, because it does take collaboration. And I think collaboration is kind of an important word that's going around in higher education now. Whereas we were looking at doing things simply as a researcher or scientist. I think we're quickly moving away from those days, and that's been my experience working at multiple levels of universities. Our department turned 100 years old on July 1st, and so we're celebrating our centennial, and so we're doing lots of different things this year as a part of that centennial process, and today I think is an important part of that. This actually fits within our strategic plan as a department in terms of engaging collaborators and engaging new folks outside of our department. So again, for those of you who are interested, you can contact me and I'll help you get in contact with one of our faculty who might be interested in collaboration. Because we're looking to collaborate, we're looking to play a bigger role within our college and within our university as well. So it's an exciting time for us as we turn 100 years old and start to to look at how we're going to look in the next 100 years as a department. So again, help me in thanking Hannah for her time being here today.